Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zeiss Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark. Hello, everyone.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Arcane Mark.
To Arcane Mark. So, you've seen it happen before, whether it is in your tabletop RPG group, or maybe it's Jar Jar Binks from Star Wars, or any other kind of character that shows up in a movie or TV show or book series. The wacky, zany character who's there just to be wacky and zany, and who is not usually a fan favorite, but generally, you know, maybe there's one or two people, such as the one who created that character, who likes that character. At a tabletop RPG group, it can be very divisive if you bring that kind of character in. However, that's not to say that Linda and I are against bringing in unique characters, unexpected characters, or wacky character ancestries. I mean, Linda wrote the Leshy ancestry. She's the over Leshy.
If you want to be a plant person, I mean,
and
the thing is that
I created the dungeon ancestry where you play an intelligent dungeon, or the intelligent weapon ancestry where you play a weapon. So, like, we are very much in favor of the ability to play as something that is strange or out of the ordinary. But there's a way to do it. There's a secret to fix this problem that you can have. And it's not a problem that is super easy. There's not just an immediate one silver bullet solution where you're like, now everything is done.
It's really going to depend on your group.
You do need to know your group. You might have someone like Derek from Knights of Last Call who's like, humans and elves and dwarves are his jam, and maybe halflings, but even anything beyond the most traditional Tolkien-esque stuff, and you get into ones that he doesn't like. Someone in your group might be like that. They might just literally only want to play with certain ancestries. But in a lot of cases, it might seem that way from your perspective if you're someone like us who loves some of the more unusual ancestries. But there's a lot of other undercurrents that are going on that with the situation, and these are things that you can help with. These are things you can fix, you can improve, and you can make it so instead of your character being memorable because everyone's like, it's the Scrappy-Doo or the Jar Jar Binks, your character becomes memorable for being one that is beloved and that no one will ever forget from that campaign.
So when it comes to picking sort of things like, you know, your ancestry or like your character's story or like, you know, things like that, you're going to want to take a look at what is going to fit within the framework of what exists in the game world, as well as sort of the social contract of the game. You know, if there's a game where it takes place in a low magic setting and you're like, well, you know, I'm a puppet, I'm a living puppet, and then that's like not really something that fits with what could exist in the world. Or like, oh yeah, you know, my character is someone who makes electropunk music, and it's like, yeah, well, but you know, this world hasn't really invented electricity or other things like that. So some of these ideas may create friction with the sense of reality of the world. Another thing that you might often see in wacky characters is fourth wall breaking. Characters who are like, yes, you know, I'm going to name my character based on a real world pun, or have them use like real world sayings or things like that. And, you know, some groups are cool with playing around with the fourth wall, like, you know, reaching out into reality with the things that they do, and having characters be like self-aware in that way, wink and nudge at the camera. But if the rest of the group isn't doing that, then having your character be one that does that is more likely to have them be like, oh, you're like playing to an audience that's off the stage instead of actually engaging with the story.
Once you've done a vibe check and made sure you did not have, unrelated to being a wacky character, weird gags or antics, and made sure that your character fits within the setting, which even a non-wacky character might not. If you've always seen that happen, and it's an entire separate episode to talk about the person who it's like, in this one, humans are having a war against hobgoblins, and then and you're playing on the human side, and they're like, I want to play a hobgoblin who wants the hobgoblins to win. And it's like, but you're literally this adventure. The only thing I want is that you're in the army on the human side. No, but I want to play a hobgoblin who wants the hobgoblins to win. That's a different thing, right? So you can actually make a character that doesn't fit the campaign, even if they're not wacky. So once you've made sure they fit the campaign, once you made sure they don't have a weird shtick,
Yeah, well, I
there's
mentioned that
actually
there.
still a lot of issues that you are going to have to deal with.
But I want to go back though, because
Why?
I wasn't quite,
Okay.
I wasn't quite done with that. Because it sounds like you were thinking that wasn't necessarily related. I want to bring up why I brought that up.
It's related. It's just that it also
because-
can happen
yeah,
whether or not.
But I
you're
think
like
that like wacky characters are by far and away more likely to push into some of those boundaries, and that's one of the issues that people can have with them. So making sure that you're not pushing into those issues sets you up for like a much better place.
I think that there's a lot of times characters push into those boundaries. You can just have a dwarf named Thorin Oakenshield.
Mm-hmm.
That is literally just the name from Lord of the Rings and is not wacky at all, but is just equally much this is just a character from fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Or a dwarf whose name is like Booze McAlcohol or something like that. So I think that it's a separate thing, but it may be the case that the same kind of players sometimes bring in those kinds of characters. But
yeah,
I think that many people play wacky characters not just because they completely want to play it as a gag. And the rest of this episode is mostly going to be focused on what to do, assuming that you were not going in with the idea, well, this was entirely a gag. Mm-hmm. Because if it is a gag and the rest of your group is not all in on that beer and pretzels approach, you're not going to make it work. But with this episode, we're assuming that you will be able to make it work. And that's because your wacky character is not necessarily a gag. Mm-hmm. So let's think about that. Your character is wacky. Maybe they're literally a dungeon. Maybe they're a weapon or a spell like one of the Ancestries Linda wrote. Or a weird little plant person. Or this penguin wizard that was on the thumbnail, right? You could play those characters. Mm-hmm. First of all, you might wonder, how do I even build those characters? In Pathfinder, a lot of those are either easy to build just right from the box or with ancestry options from like Battlezoo Ancestries or other third-party books are a snap, or you can come up with your own custom or work with the GM to come up with options to play that. But assuming that you have that character concept and you are not attempting to make a complete joke, you really do want to make a character for the game. One of your biggest sort of pitfalls is going to be accidentally making a character who is one note, and your note is your one wacky thing. So that you're a penguin wizard, and maybe everything is about the fact that you're a penguin wizard. Mm-hmm. The only thing you do is
waddle around, and eat fish.
Talk about how you're a penguin and that you look like you're wearing a tuxedo. Make jokes about eating fish constantly. And everything is only about being a penguin.
You don't have any other personality or goals or character growth. You just are a penguin, and you want to make sure everyone always knows you're a penguin.
Yes.
Now, I do want to point out, if you're playing something that's very one-shot in nature, or like, you know, you're playing, say, an organized play game, and you're not going to play with those folks again, so you're just trying to get your one shtick out there in the bit of screen time that you have, or you're playing like a one-shot adventure, and the point is, you know, someone's the penguin wizard and someone's some other wacky thing, and the point of the game is being wacky, then you can totally be fine with a one-note wacky character. But if you're playing in a long-running campaign, that kind of stuff can definitely get old.
In one-shots, you kind of have to have characters who have just a shtick and show it off. We've mentioned that before in several previous episodes. But exactly as Linda said, if you want your character to be one that is just working with this group throughout your campaign, you want to make sure you have personality, you have goals, you have other aspects to your character, and that your character is thought out. By which I mean, yeah, you could play as a dungeon and your character is a dungeon, but think about what that means to be a dungeon. Think about what it means if your character is a weapon. What does that mean about your worldview? How do you view other weapons if you're a weapon? Or if you're a dungeon, what do you think about the idea of looting dungeons? Like, is that impolite? Or would it be impolite not to take the treasure that the other dungeons leave out for you? If you're a weapon, what do you kind of feel about the way that the other characters in the party use other weapons? Or, like, if they sunder a weapon in a campaign or a type of TTRPG that allows you to break weapons. Like, do you think that that's, like, killing, even if they're not an intelligent weapon?
Yeah, and on a similar note, you know, we've definitely had situations. I just had one come up in a game recently, and I've had ones come up where like Leshy characters tend to be more okay with gore because it's like it's from like flesh, whereas like when they see like a tree that's really mangled, they might be like, ugh.
The Leshy's like, I don't understand why the expression sappy means that it's just kind of very, very sort of saccharine and sweet, whereas bloody means that it's gross.
Yeah.
To me, sappy means that it's all the plant guts are spewing out, and bloody just means, okay, it's got this animal blood on it. That's fine. So you think about those situations. Think about what it means to be a plant person. Or for a Leshy, they're not only plants, they are embodiments of these vitae, these nature incarnations that are like almost like the oversoul of the land that just one little piece of it went out and became into a plant person.
So it's a part of what's going to influence, your character's personality and their worldview, but it's not everything that they are.
Exactly. So if you actually take the moment and take just a few minutes to think about what are the implications of being this ancestor? What does it really mean? How do they think differently? How are they treated differently by everyone around them? And how does that shape their experience of the world compared to Joe Human, the fighter?
And if the thing that makes them wacky isn't their ancestry, but is instead like, a hobby that they have, or an item that they use, or things like that, then then it can sort of be the same. Like, what groups might you be part of, or what way, just building yourself around, like, I'm gonna make some kind of, you're playing an inventor who's built around the idea of like, I really want to make this one particular invention. And
or your character is a crossword puzzle writer in character, and they constantly are writing crossword puzzles. And be like, okay, so they're like the Riddler. But what does that mean? Like, obviously they need to have something beyond just that they're making crossword puzzles. Like, how does that fit into things? What is the motivation for these crossword puzzles? Not just that you like crossword puzzles. And so build that in and make it be tied to things. And try to find a way to make it be tied to other players' characters in a way that makes them feel good. Whether that's about your crossword puzzles, whether that's about your penguin. Maybe your penguin is always doing like a March of the Penguin style thing, but following around after one of the other characters and props that character up. Because if you are just being wacky and constantly pulling the spotlight onto yourself only for being wacky, that part of the reason that some people don't like that is actually also that it's just kind of drawing the attention onto them like an attention hog. So if your wacky character is actually one that is very good at sharing the spotlight and you're inherently connected to someone else, like let's say you're a dungeon and you always talk to like the archaeologist character and be like, I wish you could tell me a little bit more about the history of some of these floors inside of my dungeon. I feel like it might reveal more about my own past.
Yeah.
Get them to talk about what they like, what interests them. Or build a hook to yourself that specifically ties to somebody else. That is going to make you be a part of the tapestry of the party. And even maybe some skeptics, like I can't speak to the major skeptics like Derek from Knights of Last Call, who's just known. He has his kind of thing about being the person who doesn't like the other ancestries. But for most people, I think they're going to get excited about your unusual character because your unusual character is excited about them, and it ties into them too.
And on a related note, make sure you know why that character is tied into the story. I mean, if you're going on this grand adventure and you ask people, like, why are you motivated to do the adventure? And the person's like, I'm a penguin! I'm here! Whee! It's like, okay, well.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Linda's example is part of the reason why some people are hesitant towards having a weird character, is because they expect to see that I'm a penguin, guys. I'm just here for the fish, or something like that.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that your weird character can't be funny and can't tell jokes or be a bit of comic relief. But if you want to be someone who is interesting to your fellow players, then you want to be someone who can be serious too and is also contributing.
Yeah. And one thing too is that it can be a little harder in some ways to have these kind of jokey characters be successful in, or wacky characters be successful in as a TTRPG PC compared to like in another form of media, because definitionally you're one of the main characters of the story. So, if your concept only has enough heft to be like an occasional background character, then that's not really going to work out.
That's right. Generally, in the other media that you've watched, even the ones you didn't like Jar Jar Binks, were a background character when they were the comic relief. Jar Jar was not like one of like the 4 most main characters of the prequel Star Wars. That would have been unbearable if Jar Jar was one of the 4 most spotlight characters of those movies, right? And Jar Jar was already not good. So this is another reason why it's even worse for a tabletop RPG, where this is one of like the 4 big heroes or protagonists who are like main focus characters in the story. Think about your favorite TV shows. There often is, depending on what the shows are, there's the real main focus characters, and then there's sort of the peripheral side characters. So if your show has like an A plot, there might be a B plot, and maybe some of the side characters only ever get involved with the B plot in most episodes, and they might only have a few major things going on with them. But the main characters usually get involved in the A and the B, and they interconnect. There's all sorts of things going with their character arc, a lot of important decisions and emotional moments. And you can't have that if you're that comic relief B-plot side character when you're supposed to be a main character.
I'm seeing some conversation about the theory that Jar Jar was a Sith Lord. Oh man, I wish they had done that.
Yeah, that would be hilarious.
That would be, there's a because it looks like that was also building out of Dustin saying that sometimes gimmick characters give the GMs huge reach to tie the character into the campaign after character creation, letting them take the spotlight later in the game when the gimmick gets tired.
And the question is Don Quixote a gimmick character who is actually the protagonist? Like, in a sense, but also remember that he is also someone who's deluded and is not actually sort of going after giants. He's going after windmills, and like sort of part of the story is about his disconnection with things. So like, you probably are not playing like a literal Don Quixote in a real campaign in that sense.
Because you're actually overcoming the challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically what you want to look into with your weird character is tie into the other players' characters, tie into the campaign, tie into your own character's motivations, backstory, and other aspects other than just the one thing that makes you weird. This isn't just the penguin wizard who's the only penguin wizard. Maybe there are other penguin wizards, but this particular penguin wizard is interested in astrology and sort of celestial star magic, and has always wanted to study the ancient civilization that once had star magic in the northern seas, despite having lived in the southern sort of Antarctic regions of the world due to being a penguin.
Or maybe they are the only penguin wizard, but they became a penguin wizard because they were once a wizard familiar that was exposed to an arcane explosion that slew the wizard, thus allowing them to absorb arcane power, and they want to try to one day complete the research that the wizard they once served was doing, or they want to move away from that, or they want to get revenge on someone who was involved in the fact that went wrong, and they're trying to find their place in a world where people don't expect that penguins can be wizards.
All those stories that Linda proposed are, really compelling. The wizard familiar penguin who became a wizard to publish a co-thesis with the original wizard, right? That reason why it got so interesting is because she didn't just stop at, well, I'm a penguin wizard. Look at that, guys. See how funny that is? It's a penguin. That's a wizard. And so that is just the secret. It's not a silver bullet. It won't help you if your group is absolutely hostile towards a wacky character. And sometimes they might be absolutely hostile towards it because of prior experiences with a lot of characters that, because they were unusual, did stop it. Oh, I'm a penguin wizard. That's all I need. But if you show them that your penguin wizard has depth, has interest, has like a real story, and is tied to them, the campaign story and the world, then you can convince most other players to be really interested. And since they're already a penguin wizard, they're likely to be memorable and just like sort of a super mainstay of your campaign, to the point that people years later will be like, remember that penguin wizard?
Rico, we've never actually seen a penguin wizard. I was just trying to look for an art piece that would depict like some kind of a weird or wacky character, and the penguin wizard was the first cute one that I found.
That's right. Rico claims we may have been really hurt by a
certain
penguin wizard.
No, I think a penguin wizard could be awesome. Because this is based on an art piece that I found, I knew that this wasn't going to be based on like anyone's character or concept that I was aware of. So it's one sort of our like safe thing to riff off of.
That's right.
But also with regards to, there was also something that folks were talking about is like making characters that were entirely support or were in a certain unusual way. So there's also a sense in which you can have wacky characters that are wacky because their mechanics are just completely bizarre. And they do something that's unexpected in that
But they're
way.
like, I'm just gonna, like, cook up some random alchemical foods because I'm a chef. Mm-hmm. Like, that's a little bit wacky.
Yeah.
Or we have one in our Jewel of the Indigo Owls game who's constantly partying and handing over, like, party treats and drinks to people and gives them buffs. As well as getting up their sort of swashbuckler stuff because it does those as sort of bravado actions. Actually using an archetype that Dustin, who's in chat, wrote. And so that is a very unusual idea. They are also a tiny slime in addition to that. So the character is pretty wacky, but also has more depth to them than that because they're not just the slime. They're also a sort of super intensely fanatical about this one historical figure in the area, and they know all the trivia and facts that they're trying to emulate this pirate who lived in the area, and they have this interest in parties, and so when you go between all of those things, you kind of have a character with more depth who adds a lot more to the campaign.
And then when there's like something big and exciting going on, they're always like charging out to be in the very front. And whenever there's something that they're not, there's something that other characters are doing that doesn't interest them, they'll go like literally submerge themselves in a barrel of booze and wait for an opportunity to pop out and say something.
That's right. You don't always have to be doing your shtick all the time, even if you do have a shtick as part of what you do.
And Another thing there too is looking at how do those abilities fit with the mechanics that exist in the game, because I think that people are most likely to have success with sort of these unusual mechanical ideas if they are supported by rules that exist in the game, as opposed to like trying to kit bash something that doesn't really quite work together. Dustin's talking about how class-based games like Pathfinder can make it easier to play silly characters that grow into that because the class can provide more abilities and skills as they level up, as opposed to ones where you like totally specialize into what you're going to do at first level. Yeah, I can absolutely see that. The more that's
baked in, the more that you're kind of at least forced to get useful things.
Yeah.
In D&D, you're even more forced to get a large percentage of stuff, which means no matter how shtick your character is, unless you did some kind of weird multi-class intentionally attempting to avoid anything useful, you're eventually going to get something useful.
Yeah, and I'd say that can also potentially apply to very unusual tactics too. Sometimes, you know, people are talking about playing the primary support character. That can be incredibly effective for your party. Although you just want to make sure that whatever you do, primary support's a great example of something that can be really useful, that you are contributing to the party's success in some way. You know, if your character's shtick was instead like, you know, I'm going to run away and hide for the first 3 rounds of combat and then only come out if someone gets knocked unconscious because my character is cowardly. It's like, you know, maybe that's not going to work so well.
That's right. And Rising Star points out in chat that if you are willing to be imaginative about how to explain what your character is doing, then you can make even basic classes have some very interesting or unique sort of flavor on it. As long as it doesn't change anything about sort of like the mechanics of the situation towards the character's huge advantage or disadvantage, I could easily see that too.
Yeah, I mean, you can describe, like, you know, let's say you have a penguin wizard. You know, when your penguin wizard casts spells, do they, you know, does cast like a snow spell? Does it like create like a lot of little tiny snow penguins whenever they do that? Or, you know, do you hear like the sound of ice cracking in the distance? Or what, you know, are there things that are aesthetically different about the character? Or like, you know, do they do like a little shuffle whenever they cast a spell? Does it like look a little bit different?
Absolutely. So using all of these together, you should be able to use a combination of reflavoring, a little bit of homebrewing, grabbing just some interesting books, or even just playing a system more like Pathfinder 2nd Edition that has some wackier or more out there options just bake in to be able to build that character's mechanics. Then make sure to use your creativity as a role player and as a RPG character creator to add more nuance and depth to the character. That's the way you're going to make sure your group loves your weird TTRPG character rather than kind of being like loathing them in the background as this character that is just kind of just jumping the shark on the campaign. It's not a silver bullet, won't help with everyone, and it won't necessarily do everything by itself, but it's a big help in a lot of situations. And Math Guy Dave, thanks for gifting a membership.
Thanks for gifting a membership, Math Guy.
So, I believe that I've covered the main things that I was looking at. What about you, Linda?
Yeah, I think that that just about covers what I was thinking about as well. Do we have any? While we go ahead and put in a poll, do we have any questions or other thoughts from folks?
Please like and subscribe. Even join if you're willing to join us, or you might have just gotten gifted by Math Guy Dave there. And if anyone has any questions about their own unusual characters, we would be happy to answer them right now. Otherwise, please vote for Build an Item Workshop, Ask Arcane Mark, Save My Game Q&A, GM Tools Unique Encounter Areas, Arcane Mark Plays, or Other. And if it's Other, tell us what you want.
Looks like we got 2 votes for 3 so far, because Math Guy was the one who voted for 3 earlier. Thank you for posting that down below and also reminding us that you voted earlier.
There we go. Another week for Tyranny. And welcome to a new
Rising
Leaf
Star.
Fleshy, Rising Star, PF2.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us.
So it looks like Tyranny has the lead on the vote. Yes!
Yes, Tyranny. An avalanche of tyranny.
An avalanche of tyranny it is. So, join us on Saturday for whatever the vote was.
What are we doing on Saturday?
It is whatever was before Unique Encounter Areas.
Oh, we did get a vote for Arcane Mark Plays.
We did.
Wasn't enough to overwrite the 3s, but it does show that there is still some interest.
Yes. Join us on Saturday for whatever was the previous Tyranny, and then Tuesday for the new Tyranny.
Oh wait,
Encounter
There's
Areas.
a question. Do you have any experience or advice for players who enjoy playing a one-shot with silly and weird NPCs?
In one-shot, all bets are off. Nobody's going to be able to explore the depth of your character. Lean in on the shtick. Do try to make sure that shtick is connected to at least one other player's character so that you're not constantly hogging the spotlight on your character, but you need to use shtick in a one-shot. Because the question is, do they even know what your character is by the end of the one shot or not?
Yeah.
You can't do anything much more than that. So
I would say as long as your shtick doesn't. One other thing with tips on one shot for that way is that because one shots tend to be structured more to like we have a specific goal that you're trying to get to in the end. Make sure that your character is someone who is going to buy into the concept and isn't going to be constantly trying to smash the mold.
That's right. Don't try to be that one person who's playing the Hobgoblin who wants the Hobgoblins to win in the War Against the Hobgoblins one-shot. Unless the GM intentionally says, I want one person to be a Hobgoblin infiltrator. But that's a different story.
Yes.
Maybe a story for a whole different tyrannical episode. All right, everyone. Enjoy the tyranny. We will see you on Saturday for more tyranny. I can't remember which one. And on Tuesday for Tyranny of GM Tools, Unique Encounter Areas. For people who are wondering about the tyranny, we call it the Tyranny of GM Tools and tools in general because the GM Tools Design Diaries Player Tools category.
The things we put in 3 win so often.
Win the vote like 80% or more of the time. So,